this is going down a rabbit hole that's a little like, I don't think we've smoked enough pot for that conversation. Um, that is the question in so many ways. Like, what is the good life? What is the meaning and purpose of our life?
Do you ever wonder if you could or should be doing something better with your money? If so, you're in the right place. Join us on the Make the Most of Your Money podcast as we discuss the technical, behavioral, and spiritual elements necessary to making the most of your money. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Make the Most of Your Money podcast. I'm your host, Colin Page, and here with my co-host, Taylor Stewart. How are you doing, Taylor?
Lovely, man. Yeah, Thanksgiving's over. We all had strep, so we're feeling good now.
Oh, bummer. Yeah, I won't tell you where we went for Thanksgiving.
Italy.
Yeah,
I already know.
Anyways, today we got a special guest, a good friend of mine. But before I introduce him, I just want to tell like a little bit background and why we wanted to have him on. So, we talk in this podcast about the technical, behavioral, and spiritual elements of making the most of your money, and a lot of the time we focus on those first two, the technical and the behavioral things. But today I think we're going to focus a little more on the last one, the spiritual elements, and not spiritual necessarily in a Christian framework, but spiritual in terms of, what money reveals about our inner life and how we find meaning and purpose and, going beyond spreadsheets. So today we are joined by pastor, friend, the author of Cross Street Substack, the Reverend Josh Bascom. So welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me, guys. Colin, known Colin for a long time. One of the smarter, kinder guys that I know. Taylor, I'm not so sure about you yet.
It's true. It's been a good 18 minutes we've known each other, though.
We're gonna get there.
So, Josh, we go back a ways, but but one of the I've really been enjoying your Substack, your new Substack called Cross Street Notes from the Intersection of Faith and Work, where you write a lot about kind of the limits of self-help and our need for help outside ourselves and kind of the human condition, and we've bonded over shared appreciation of Morgan Housel. And so I've just been we've had a lot of conversations in the past about money and meaning, and I'm just excited to have you meet Taylor and for us to record a conversation.
Yeah,
because I
me
think
too.
other people will benefit from it too. Yeah, I don't know. We'll start out. Is there anything you'd like to say, Josh, just kind of off the bat about your background or kind of where you come from?
Well, I'm an Episcopal minister here in Charlottesville, Virginia. I don't have too much to say about myself. I'm a husband, father of 3. I think I just thought of this a few minutes ago. I was thinking about how it's interesting that we are here on this podcast today, a minister talking with some wealth management guys, because I remember a number of years ago when Colin was in a bit of a transition of thinking about what he was going to do next before he went into wealth management. I remember I don't know if we got coffee or pizza, lunch somewhere, and we were just chatting. And I remember thinking to myself, and I think sharing with you, that I was like, Colin, I think you'd make a really good minister. And I say that because he's a really great listener. He is a very thoughtful person who is able to listen to not just the facts of your life, but what's actually going on in your life. And by that, I mean like reading between the lines and like asking thought-provoking follow-up questions, because he actually cares about the person he's listening to. And Colin's also like a really smart guy who knows scripture and philosophy and culture really well. And I was just like, gosh, you'd be great at this, man. And then a year or so later, you told me you were going to go into wealth management. And I thought to myself, Man, I think that's a really, really great fit because I see the work that you all do as real ministry. I mean, gosh, when there are only a few places where, or I should rephrase that. I would say there are few and perhaps not really many, if any, other places in our lives where the rubber really hits the road more when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to identity, than when it comes to our money. And what do you lose sleep over more than anything? Money is near the top of that list. And so I find myself talking about money in my office with people all the time, mostly in a very indirect way, but it's there. And so I see the work that you guys are doing as real, real ministry, listening to people. Um, what are your what are your real hopes and dreams? What are your real anxieties? I'm guessing it's not just to get a number in a bank account. I'm guessing
Mhm.
the anxieties and the hopes are go deeper than that. So um, I think it's wonderful for us to be talking today.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah, no question. I mean, I see so much overlap um, between, I've always said between being a wealth manager or being a therapist and being a pastor or a counselor is kind of a very similar role in that, in a very privileged position to get to kind of get at what's behind the surface level or the facade and try to understand people's hopes and dreams, as you said, and fears and anxieties also.
Yeah,
Money's a real interesting like avenue into that kind of inner life.
I mean, I think it's really profound. You used the word privilege there because um, money really is like in our relationship with it, it says so much about who we think we are, what our purpose is, and like, and yet we shield so much of that from so many people. I mean, we don't talk about how much money we make. We don't talk about how we do our investments unless you're like really talking with a select few people. That's pretty private information in a lot of circles. Um, and so I mean, someone's really letting you look under the hood. They're lifting up their skirt and
Why
showing you
why
like
why do you
what's
why do you think that is? I've long had this saying. I used to teach a class, and this might be a little crude, but I used to do this. I would ask somebody in the audience, "Did you have sex last night?" And ha ha ha, and they'd sometimes answer. And I said, "How much money is in your bank account?"
yeah, no one's gonna
No
answer.
one will talk about it. And I just think that's fascinating. Like this, why is it that people are so uncomfortable talking about money, do you think?
I mean, I would be curious to know if this is a true statement in all cultures, or if
Mm.
it's more so an American thing. If it's more a, I mean, is it an East Coast thing? I don't know. I mean, and I'm a little bit of a small town guy who can only kind of speak to what I know here in Charlottesville, but I know that that's absolutely true, um, particularly with younger people. I spent a lot of time working with UVA students, um, and they are, I mean, their grades, but even by the time they're a sophomore in college, it seems like, or a second year, as they call them at UVA, like their internship and then their job is such a huge part of their identity, and they will talk about it, but they won't talk about compensation. They won't talk about like some specifics are fair game and others are not, and I don't know if it's this awareness that it's like in poor taste. There seems to be some understanding that um, like even really wealthy people, they'll say things like money can't buy you happiness, and that's just sort of like what we're all. There's this like collective social understanding that that's the truth, and so if that's the truth, then we're not going to talk about it because it's either in poor taste or like I feel a little bit guilty that I am looking for happiness as much as I am in my bank account.
Mm.
Um, it's really interesting to unpack that. Like, can money buy you happiness? Maybe it can in some ways more than others. Um, I don't know. Colin, you have an idea of why people don't like sharing their bank accounts, their investment
Yeah.
strategies?
I mean, yeah, I think it's not so much about like the number is this big secret. It's like what we think it says about us. And what's interesting is like while we may not want to share that number, we have no qualms, displaying our wealth in other ways. Whether it's the car you drive, the house you own, the school you send your kids to, or the vacation you took, and the pictures you posted on Instagram. There are all sorts of other ways to demonstrate, like, hey, I've made it, than just knowing the number. And so, yeah, that's a weird dynamic where like it's so taboo to talk about, here's how much I actually have, that kind of inner, secret, and how we choose to display it. And I think it gets a lot to like, I mean, is it Morgan Housel that makes it, and I'm sure he's not the first, but like the distinction between being rich and being wealthy. And being rich is like what you it is the things you can buy or consume, or the trips you take, the car you drive, the country club you belong to, that requires like a constant flow of money. And being wealthy is more, not so much about the expense, but that you can sustain, but the total amount in your balance sheet, the total amount of assets you've accumulated. And it's interesting, like those two don't always like match one another. You can have people who are driving a real fancy car whose bank account does not look like that. But yet all we get to see is like the outside. We only get to see the trappings of riches or wealth or money, not the inner truth.
I think it's one of those just unknowns, and there's so many different potential answers, but one of them that just crossed my mind is like, I mean, you guys know this infinitely more than I do, but the typical state of personal finances of someone's in the United States is like, it looks pretty bad when you look underneath the hood. And despite the fact that they are driving like a Range Rover or a new Suburban. And so maybe it's the fact that people are like, if we all kind of showed you what's really going on, like it wouldn't look very good for most of us.
I think something I was thinking about, I think it's interesting. I think it goes both ways. I know plenty of wealthy people that wouldn't want people to know how wealthy they are.
Yeah.
Because there's a fear of how people would treat them then. And people who try to signal that they're wealthy who don't want you to know that they're actually not. And I think some of that's, well-intentioned, that like you just aren't sure how other people are going to react, so let's just not make that a known data point about yourself. No, that's fascinating though. Like,
remember, I think it was I mean, the fact that it's a taboo. You guys familiar with Scott Galloway? He's in my opinion, a more douchey version of Morgan Housel. I think he says a lot of good stuff, but he's just like, all right, man, you need to take yourself a tenth as seriously as you do. Which in fact, like that's almost entirely Morgan Housel's charm, is that he's so humble. But he kind of pointed out at one point, I don't know if it was in his book or in a podcast I listened to, where he was sort of talking about how, and this is maybe a little bit either cynical or but he was saying like there's something about the fact that we don't talk about how we make money, kind of is like one of these like gatekeepers between the wealthy and the poor. The fact that like we don't talk about, there's so many people who don't talk about their wealth in public. And as a result of that, or even in like common conversations among friends, and if you think about that, you go a couple generations of that and you have people who have no idea, they don't even know what an index fund is because they've never heard anyone talk about it, because no one talks about anything other than the baseball game last night or the weather that's coming up this weekend. And that was an interesting observation that he was making, that was like, if we're looking for whatever political perspective you have, like you're looking for some sort of more equality with like income equality, maybe the first thing we need to do is just start talking about these things more, because the fact of the matter is like these are important things. And if only the wealthy people are talking, or if no one's talking about their finances publicly, then people who didn't grow up in wealthy homes with dads and moms who were, listening to Dave Ramsey on the way to school in the morning, then they don't know a thing about these things. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about that, but it's interesting observation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fascinated by, and this gets into somewhat the spiritual realm too, but like this, we tend to judge, when all we can do most of the time is judge what we see on the outside of someone, and whether that's, the trappings of wealth, or um but we don't know what's going on the inside, or maybe we think we know, but I think what's so fascinating is how that where that breaks down. The idea that we could know judge something from the outside and know what's going on the inside. I know Morgan Housel uses the anecdote about when he was a valet driver in Los Angeles, or some fancy hotel or something, and the kinds of cars that he would get to drive to the lot, and remembers thinking, you know the point of the point of it being, if um what you see when you see somebody drive up in a Ferrari or whatever, what you think of that person is not, oh, what a great guy that must be, how successful he is. You think, oh, well, if I had a car like that, then I would feel successful and I would be the man, And so we're comparing, we're not even thinking at all about, the driver of that car, but what it would be like if we were the driver, and how that would then engender respect and admiration in other people of us. But his own observation, completely dispels that notion, because you're not even thinking about the driver in the car and
Yeah.
how great he is. You're just thinking about what other people would think of you if you were in the car. And clearly they're not going to think about you either. That's just,
Yeah.
um,
It's such a perfect illustration, and analogy of how, I mean, and it gets to his bigger point of the fact that, like, one of his primary principles is the idea that, like, I've got some really good news for you. No one is thinking about you,
mm,
because they're just thinking about themselves. Like, no one is thinking about you as much as you are thinking about yourself. And um but then to play that out with the car analogy is a really, really powerful thing. Um and it also, the as you've set up that framework, Colin, I mean, thinking about how we compare our insides to other people's outsides
Yeah.
is this, like, there is this incredible curse that we seem to carry with us of, like, though our way of being in the world seems to be comparison. Like, comparison is the way that we make sense of so much, and we always seem to be doing it in a slightly flawed way, because we are comparing our insides to someone else's outsides. They might be like a very content person who's not interested in status. They just really like that car. We have no idea what their relationship is to that car. Whereas we are thinking about it, I mean, or I shouldn't say we, let's say someone like myself maybe would be thinking about how, like, that car is gonna make me seem cool. That car is gonna make me seem worthy. That car is gonna make me lovable in the eyes of at least someone in this town. And that's what we're getting at in just about every aspect of our life, is trying to reach the state of, we talk about status, um and I think that makes sense in the world of finance when it comes to, like, status of, like, this neighborhood, this car. But really what we're all looking for is the status of lovability. Like, all we want is to be loved. And it's an interesting thing how we go about comparing our insides to someone else's outsides. Our search, we take our search for love, and we enter it into this scenario where we're shopping for cars. And you think about it like that, it's just nonsense. But we're I think we're all guilty of it, in one way or another.
yeah. And so you in your writings, I mean, you've been focused a lot lately on the kind of self-help genre. And that's I think that's a fertile ground to kind of maybe talk about next, because the if we've diagnosed the problem, if the problem is like this deeper human condition, whether you want to call that, original sin, or, envy, greed, that sort of framing of it, or whether you want to frame it as, um, yeah, we just have a limited ability to um, to do the things that we want to do, and not do the things we don't want to do. If we look at this money as a lens into the human heart,
Yeah.
what do we do about it? And I think there are a lot of people, many of us turn to find like purpose in careers, or in, bettering ourselves, or whatnot. And you have some unique thoughts and perspective on kind of that, where are other places people go to find out this kind of what to do about it.
Gosh, well, I mean, I do think self help is something that we are all engaged with, whether we're willing to admit it or not. I mean, like there on the surface level, we all are on the surface level. Like you can go to your local Barnes and Noble and you can see that there's a big self help section there, and these are popular books. You go to coffee shops, a lot of those books. In the self help section, they're the ones that are out on people's tables. If you're in an airplane, if you actually look at the facts and figures, self-help books sell really well in our country. Now, there's a whole lot of people who I find I have conversations with people all the time where I just throw the word self-help out and they're like, oh, I know self-help is so bad. It's so dumb. It's so cheap, on and on and on and on. And it's like, well, what are some of your favorite books? And they'll be like, I'm really a big fan of like business leadership books, or I really like reading about stoicism, or I really like reading about this philosophy that it might not be in the self-help section, but it is this idea that if I can read the right book, listen to the right podcast, get the right wealth like financial advisor, get the get the right advice, then I am going to be able to apply that to the problems of my life and solve my deepest problems. And and I think that the way that I see the world through my own personal experiences, as a 38-year-old who's, you know, I've lived a little bit, I've suffered some, but I'm also a minister who's I feel like I've gotten to witness a lot of life, even though I may not have lived a lot of life.
Mhm.
And one thing that I've found is that the biggest problems in our lives, regardless of what they are way above our pay grade. We are not able to pull ourselves out of the drowning ditch by pulling ourselves up by the own hair, like the hair on the top of our heads. We're in need of being rescued. And so I think that the self-help, the idea of self-reliance is really sexy. It's a very American, it's very masculine. The list goes on and on. But at the end of the day, I think when that becomes our ultimate hope for peace and for purpose, um, then I think we're in trouble. And I think that that is something that I would say is a specifically Christian perspective that I hold. But you don't have to be a Christian to realize, like, man, I go to bed at night and I look back on my day, and there's a lot of things that I wish I didn't do that I did. There are a lot of things that I wish I did do that I didn't do. And it seems like my willpower isn't quite as strong as I would like it to be. Um, and if that's the case, then maybe if I'm the creator of my own problem, then maybe I shouldn't be the solution to that problem. And maybe I'm in need of a little bit of help from outside myself. So this idea of like self-reliance, and self-help is something that I've been wrestling with because I've seen it super popular, very, very prevalent everywhere. Um, and I've been spending a lot of time just sort of being really critical of it. And the reason that I started this Substack was because I'm wanting to really stop just saying that's dumb. You shouldn't read it. Like that's the last thing you should hear from your minister is that you're dumb. What I'd like, what what you should have is someone who's interested in like tell me why you're reading that book. Like let's sit down and have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation about it because there seems to be some part of you that wants to improve. Um, there seems to be some part of you that wants to improve, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So let's have that conversation. And that's the kind of the conversation I'm trying to have on the Substack. Um, being critical but charitably so. Um, it's hard to do when I'm finding myself reading Ryan Holiday books on stoicism because stoicism is just it's low-hanging fruit. I don't know. What do you guys think about self-help when you hear that phrase?
I'm a big fan. I think the fact that self-help is such a massive genre just speaks to this desire, a lot of lost people and a lot of searching people.
Yeah.
Which is really what we're talking, like, just want to reiterate that technical behavioral spiritual framework. Like it's like technical is like what to do, like invest in this fund, just the technical stuff. The behavioral is actually able to do it. That's kind of the willpower piece that you're talking about in a lot of ways. The spiritual is what are you putting it all towards? And that's the part that people miss. Like the technical part of money is so freaking easy. It's a textbook. AI can answer any of your questions. Behavioral, that's challenging. It's the spiritual piece that people aren't putting it towards the life that they actually want because they don't know what they actually want. They're searching. And so they read self-help books. And I think the answers are there. You just don't need 5,000 of them.
I think that's a really great framework of it, Taylor. One thing that I would say is, I think unfortunately people are looking for the spiritual answer in the self-help section of the bookstore.
Sure.
I think that's an unfortunate thing because I think the self-help is actually much more about the like, so much of it is for like you read Atomic Habits by James Clear and it's just like, these are the things that you need to do to be more organized and have better habits. And in fact, to what end, that's the question that I think is such an important question. That's the question, like, what is the purpose of this? Particularly when it comes to money, particularly when it comes to finance, particularly when it comes to discerning your careers. I spent a lot of time talking about that with college students and also people our age who are trying to figure out, should I stay in this career? Should I go on another career? Like, to what end are you working these 80-hour weeks? And unfortunately, so much self-help, the answer is just simply optimization. Like that's what to what end? Well, so I'm further optimized. Well, to what end? So I'm even more optimized. Like there actually isn't an answer to that question.
I think this isn't totally related. I don't have a nice way to tie this in. I think the biggest issue, a lot of people and a lot of self-help is people are looking to eliminate suffering from their life. That's an impossible task. And the quicker you can learn to embrace suffering and learn how to suffer well, if you no longer seek help removing suffering, life gets a hell of a lot easier. And so much self-help is like learning how to like never feel stress, always be happy, optimize this and that. That's the wrong kind of self-help to me. So that's where I'm saying like the answers are in there. Just for me, at least for me, I'm like what I view like the right, like the version of self-help I could give it to you in $5, 5 frameworks for what I think how you need to live your life. But like that's where I think it's that desire to remove suffering at all times that puts people on this just. It's a journey they'll never complete.
I think that's a huge part of it. I think another big part of it is that the problem is so often is so much bigger than we actually think. And what I mean by that is that like the problem of pride, for example, or the problem of, I mean, the list could go on and on, but like the problem, I really do mean it when I say the problem is us in many ways. Like we can't, you might have the 5 right self-help books with the 5 right frameworks, but what does that at the end of the day actually make it possible for you to, as the Stoic would say, simply meditate on what's in your control and what's not in your control. Like, not in my experience. My experience is that there's so much less in my control than I actually think there
100%.
is. And when it comes to so many of these things, the 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 problem is one in which I'm in need of rescue from outside myself. And that's where, like, you think about you think about your relationships. Like, you get in an argument with your wife. You find yourself that you've messed up. Um, like, you can't optimize your way out of having screwed up something with your wife
Mm-hmm.
or screwed up something with your kids. You can't you can't willpower your way out of the fact that you have loved her imperfectly. What you are in need of is someone who knows the truth about what has gone on, knows the truth about you, what you've done or what you haven't done, and is able to look at you and say, I love you and I forgive you. Like, that's the only hope for that scenario. There's not really much you can do other than confess. And I think that's a little bit of an analogy there of, like, the hope's going to come from outside of ourselves. We're playing very little. We're participating fairly little when it comes to some of these things. But this is where I'm finding it, like, sometimes we over theologize a lot of these things, and we get to the place where it's like, I don't have any willpower. My only hope is coming from outside myself. Therefore, burn all the self-help books. Uh, let's roll our eyes at any desire to improve in our lives and just, like, say Jesus a couple of times and get on with the day. And it's like, well, that's not very satisfying either.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like, I do want to find out what are the things that can make me a better husband. What are the things that can make me a better father? What, if anything, are there, like, the areas of that I maybe do have some control over in my life? But the fascinating thing from a Christian perspective that I find is the more I dig into these things, I actually don't find more areas where I have control. I find more areas where I have less control. And I find more areas where I just need to rely on the grace of God to break in my life and give me hope for today and for tomorrow, rather
Mm.
than loving because I was told to love, loving because I was first loved. That's the framework for so much of this.
Yeah, I think I mean one of the critical like issues in our profession is like how do you actually im- uh, y- convince someone to change, or
Mm,
how do you create um the desire on their part to make different choices, whether it's with their money or or anything else. And so where does, what is that agent of change? And I think you said um a couple of things that I wanted to, highlight. Like, um, one thing that I don't think helps is just like telling somebody what to do.
mhm,
And I think that's the trap that, um, those of us in a role that is to counsel or to advise can fall into as well. Oh, it's just easy. You just need to do this, this, and this, and you'll be fine. You're giving a list of, you're asking somebody, you're just telling them what to do. And most people
yeah,
don't. It's not for not knowing what to do that they do these things. It's a deeper issue than just not knowing. Obviously, education's important, and I think that's a big reason why we have this podcast, is just to, put this basic stuff out here. But like Taylor said, like the technical stuff, at the end of the day, it's not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually how do you implement it, um, and then but as you're both saying, the bigger question of what's it all for? Boy, that's a hard thing for. It's a
Let's just
hard
jump.
thing for a financial advisor to say. I mean, that we're maybe straying into a different dimension here, but
Yeah,
but
let's go there.
well,
Like, so, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like, I think it is, if you're looking for, like, big fancy words in the response, but rather, like, if I think you guys are asking these questions all the time when someone's like, I really want to save up this amount of money, or I really want to do this. Simply asking the question of why and to what end, that's getting at that, like, maybe it'll take one more follow-up question to like really show that, like, hey, we're really talking about the spiritual here. We're talking about the meaning and purpose of life, when I'm getting at the answer of what's motivating you to have this like investment plan. Because I don't know that there's anybody out there that's like, I just really like the number 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Like, that's the answer.
What about, why do you have a desire to plan in the first place?
Yeah.
What's that about? That's a human desire to. It's a lot about control. People don't like uncertainty, which I'm happy to talk about. Humans have a desire for certainty, absolutely,
Yeah.
and planning makes them feel like that is. And I think this is where, for better or worse, I stand out amongst like your traditional advisor. Like I tell people every time, I'm not here to tell you what to think. It's just purely how to think. I don't care what you want out of life. Money's just a tool. Everything's a trade-off. So it's like, I don't do projections. Like if you meet with me, I'll never show you, here's what it will look like. Cause it's just fake certainty. And so like there's some, but I don't know, but like there's that underlying desire for certainty. I've got 100 thoughts going through my mind of like why don't we just go there? Like, what do people want? Like, we're kind of dancing around it. Like, what is a good purpose for somebody to have? Like, what should might be the wrong word, but like, what should people be putting their money towards? What is the point of all this? You say like, what you're optimizing to what end on the self-help side? What is a good answer to that? Like you say, what is this all for? What is the life you're trying to work towards? What do you think is a good answer?
Yeah, I mean, what is the answer for what is our meaning and purpose in life? I mean, you got to begin with like, are do we believe in there's some objective truthful there's some objective truth to that there is some good life, or is this purely a subjective thing where it's like, Taylor, what is your answer to that question? Or Colin, what is your answer to that question? Um, because if it's purely subjective, then it's like, well, we're following the kind of you do you model. And it's like, well, my meaning and purpose in life is this, and it might be completely antithetical to yours. Mine is family, and yours um is like having sex with as many people as you'd like. Yours is, I mean, it's going to as many baseball stadiums as I can. Like it is, and so it's hard. I think you have to begin with, are we beginning with subjective or objective truths
But
here?
I think it's interesting that even the three examples you gave, there's an inherent right answer amongst those three. Family, sex with as many people as you want, or baseball stadiums.
So
Somebody
that's
will
why,
claim. Yeah.
but I mean, if you're going to think about it philosophically, that like you would say, why? Like, why is family better than, I mean, in that sense, you are sacrificing your own self-interest for that of someone else's. That seems like, and if life is about the pursuit of happiness in our own self-interest, then like it doesn't take you can create a scenario in which like like the most personal satisfaction and gratification makes a logical sense for what a good life looks like. um I would disagree with that, and most cultures, philosophies, and religions would disagree with it. Anyway, this is going down a rabbit hole that's a little like, I don't think we've smoked enough pot for that conversation. Um, let's talk about it a little more practically. I mean, I think from my perspective, the answer to, I mean, that is the question in so many ways. Like, what is the good life? What is the meaning and purpose of our life? And I think that though I've thought about this for a fair amount of time, and it's the easiest answer that I have is Jesus's response to the Pharisees asking him, of all 613 of the Mosaic laws, which is his favorite? And by that, they're really asking, what's the most important? And they're trying to trick him. They're trying to trap him into elevating one over another. Maybe he picks one in the 10 commandments, maybe he doesn't. They're always trying to get him in trouble. But they're really also giving him an opportunity to say, like, what's the most important thing that we ought to do or ought not to do? And Jesus doesn't fall into the trap. He doesn't pick one over the other. He simply says, all the law and all the prophets, like they all hang on these two commandments, on these two summaries of the law that I'm about to give you. So Jesus takes all 613 laws of the Old Testament and he summarizes them into two. And he says, you are to love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your mind, and you are to love your neighbor as yourself. That is the meaning and the purpose of life. Now, a lot of people will get hung up on, like, well, what does it mean to love God, especially if I don't believe in God? I think the more practical one practical is not the right word, the more helpful one to, I think, focus our conversation on is the love of neighbor part. I think that is what we are made for. I think that Jesus is telling us that what is it that we are made for? Because if there is an answer to the question, what is the meaning and purpose of life? Another way of phrasing it is like, what are we made for? What were we put here for? And I think in the Christian tradition, which is a rather like radical answer, actually, is to love our neighbor, to love sacrificially, and in fact, to do what often is the opposite of the pursuit of our self-interest and our self-gratification.
Yeah, I mean, I
Love
think
that.
we've all we've all seen um, examples and counterexamples of people, pursuing the quote unquote wrong thing or the things that don't ultimately satisfy. And I think you're right that like there is something about pursuing purpose that comes from outside, whether that's the neighbor or not, that actually brings more satisfaction. We're coming up on Christmas and like the idea of giving a gift versus receiving. It's always better to give. Like you feel more satisfaction or gratification at like having given the perfect gift to somebody. The thing, not just going on their Amazon list and getting them the things that they already said they wanted, but like you actually find that perfect gift that something they need. It's something they wouldn't do for themselves. It's like perfectly fits their personality, or maybe it's like an experience that you'll get to share together, and like that is what brings joy and purpose, not like the accumulation of things or the gratification of self. Um, and
Yeah,
I think I mean, that's there, I can't quote them, but there are empirical studies that show that, for sure. I don't know. Yeah. What do you think, Taylor?
I think the pursuit of of happiness is like one of just a totally misguided, flawed thing. I don't know whether I'm missing the right words there. I think that's what sets people off. I think, yes, the pursuit of happiness, the desire for happiness, um, happiness is temporary. Like what people generally think of as happiness is, kind of that dopamine short term, I feel good. That's what a lot of people think of as happiness. And I think if you're chasing that, you literally, like, biologically can't permanently have that. And so as long as you're pursuing that, it's a flawed pursuit and you're never going to reach it. Um, and you look at, like, there's oh God, I'm going to butcher the words, eudaimonic happiness. And I'm trying to sound I'm forgetting I wrote a thing on this. Anyways, like, in the moment happiness versus long-term happiness. So like there's the eating a donut, there's the, short-term dopamine happiness. Then there's the raising kids, not fun in the moment, long-term, very, very happy, leads to more fulfillment. And I think it's just this obsession with short-term happiness, feel good now, remove pain, remove suffering. That is it's an impossible goal to reach. And I think that's what it sends people on this journey, chasing something that they can't ever actually have.
yeah,
Like to me, it's very simple. You can talk about what is a worthy purpose, whether it's to love your neighbor. I love that. My kind of definition, is to live well, and that's a super vague term. But I could talk about what that actually means to become your best self. I think those are the more fulfilling long-term things. But yeah, pursuit of happiness, removal of suffering. I see it all the time around me, and you'll never reach it. You'll never get it.
What do you do? You all have some version of this conversation with your clients?
Not all of them want to have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, by nature, I kind of bring this out of people.
Yeah.
To talk about, because it's like why do you retire in 5 years? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to go back to work? Why do you work the job you do? Why? There's no rules to any of this. People think there's a rule. I have to do this. I have to do this. My wife's that way. She's the book follower, checklist follower. She's just the textbook of the path. Why? Because most people aren't living with that intention. They haven't really designed their life. They fell into it. They did what they're supposed to do, and they're just here. And that makes me sad if that's not what they really want. And so trying to show people that there is another way. You don't have to live there. You don't have to drive there. You don't have to do any of the things you're doing. You made the choice to do it for some reason. Maybe you didn't consciously make it. So I love to try to pull that out of people.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, have you guys read Luke Burgess's book Wanting, or familiar with that at all?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's just we so much of what we think we want is based on just like copying the people around us, the people in our own immediate circle or our sort of class level, and it's really it's interesting. It's relatable. It's also really sad. I mean, but I also think that one of the really interesting things here about like there's the question of what are we made for? What is our purpose? But all is sometimes different from what are you searching for? Like, and I find that that's a really interesting question to kind of bring into this conversation of when it comes to planning, when it comes to our relationships with money. Like, what is it that you're searching for? So what is it that you're desiring?
I think people are searching for what they're made for. I think somebody who's found what they're made for is not searching. I'm not searching in life. I'm incredibly blessed. I have a crystal clear purpose for why I live, why I do everything I do. I am not searching. I have no search. I have no desire to be loved by other people. I'm completely okay. That probably could dig into that one a little bit, but like, I don't relate to that part. Like I am not searching on that. So
I don't know you that well, Taylor, but I'm calling bullshit pretty hard on
yeah,
that.
go. No, I would love for that.
And I don't, and I mean that in the way that you know that I mean it. I mean, it's in some ways we are all like, yes, I think that there are different times in our lives where we feel closer to some contentment with our relationships, with our relationship with money, with our relationships with status. Maybe I'm not searching for something in that, in my career, in those categories. But I think that regardless of what place we find ourselves in today, we are always searching for love. We are always searching for the experience of being loved and the feeling of being loved. Just because you're like, no, I've got a healthy wife, I got a healthy relationship with my kids. Like, you don't stop needing that experience of love. We end up looking for that. That's why we read stories. That's why we're always looking for these experience of like of being drawn out of ourselves and into some other story, because more often than not it is a story of that makes us feel alive. So we're searching to feel alive. I mean, I think we're always searching. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I don't know. I guess I would just kind of push back on this idea that you're not searching for anything.
No, I'm not searching for what I'm made for. I'm searching for ways to improve, get better and better myself, be better at loving other people, be better at 100 different things, but I'm not searching for my why.
And that's unique. I mean,
I understand. No, I'm very great. Go look at my LinkedIn. I talk about like, I'm incredibly grateful to have had a clear purpose. And one of my goals in life is to help other people find, define, and pursue their own. So I wasn't trying to come in here like I don't have it all figured out, but I also am incredibly grateful for the experiences I've had in the last 8 years that have led me to this place, to where, frankly, I don't struggle with some of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
what
to
what would you say is something that we're talking about that you don't struggle with?
Searching for why, the desire to be loved. I don't read self-help books for the same reason. I don't. The big two the okay, like the five framers. Good.
Why do you read self-help books?
Uh, Always learn something new. Um,
Why do you want to learn something new?
to better myself, because to me, like
Why do you
becoming
want to better yourself?
because I think that's part of that's part of living, is becoming your best version of yourself.
Do
I
you
think that's
feel how do you feel about who you are today?
I am complete. Yeah, a lot to say there. I accept who I am today, how I got here, the decisions I made that led me to here, and I have a ton to improve on.
Uh-huh. Why, based on what?
My own analysis, because I think to say the opposite would be incredibly naive. To think that I have
Yeah.
a completed project, that I'm perfect. There's
Yeah.
no way I'm perfect, and I could well, like there's always things we can improve upon, but I'm completely secure in the flawed human being that I am today. The decisions that I've made in my past have led me to the situation I am today.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think I mean, I don't want to not beat around the bush. I think, what gives you that clarity and is the things that you've been through. And if we talk about like what is an agent of change in somebody's life, like
Mm.
oftentimes it comes through suffering. It comes
Yeah.
through having, screwed up or hit bottom or gone through, have something taken from you. Um, and that is what, can shape a purpose or a why or a, you know,
And
um,
I also think that's why I revolt so much people who like yes, pain and suffering is what made me who I am. And I think that's why I push back when people seek to avoid it at all times. A human body that never experiences stress atrophies and dies so quickly. Like this desire to just never have rough patches and never stress anything is flawed. And like really, like to me,
Mm.
like the biggest change is when the pain is so great that it's better to change. And you have
Yeah.
to, it's okay to go through that. It is freaking okay and human to go through that. And to never want to have conflict, to never want to struggle, to never fail, that's just flawed.
I think in in many ways, I think that is related to this false idea of self-reliance, of this idea that we can completely rely upon ourselves to avoid suffering. We can rely on ourselves to create meaning and purpose and happiness. We can rely upon ourselves to create truth. Um, and more often than not, like one of the big influences on my life is the writer Flannery O'Connor. And she's a short story writer. She writes these really often graphic stories of these like very hubristic characters who think that they have everything sort of figured out, and ultimately what they're really believing in is just that they are they're incredibly self-righteous, like comically self-righteous characters where everyone reading it is like, oh my gosh, this grandmother of this guy is unbearable. And then some version of suffering happens in their lives, and as she describes it in her stories, it is it's the violent and painful experience of being transformed and taken from a place of self-reliance to a place of self-awareness, of this idea. I mean, it's kind of similar to the like experience of entering into like a 12-step program, of like of acknowledging that you are in need of, I can't tell what you're pointing to.
Alcoholics Anonymous is over my shoulder. 12 steps. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Big fan of AA.
Yeah, me too.
I think there's like that there is some sort of something similar to what she's saying in her description of her stories, what I find to be a compelling description of the human condition. There is this like painful recognition. I think, as you just said it, Taylor, of realizing like not changing would be more painful than
Changing.
changing. And but it's also like a huge part of beginning that is recognizing that my life is not manageable as it is today on my own. and I'm in need of, for some people, it's like, I'm in need of Jesus specifically. For some people, it's simply the act of acknowledging that, like, hey, my name's Josh and I'm an alcoholic, and shedding that light on it is the beginning of the transformation
People
itself.
need a higher power.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
step one is admitting your life that you were powerless and your life had become unmanageable. And step two is seeking of higher power. Now, I think the beauty of AA, I'm going to go completely off the rails here. AA is the greatest church I've ever attended in my life. I've seen more people come to Jesus through AA than I have in a church pew, real relationships. And the beauty of AA, it's an entirely Christian program written in the 30s. They don't talk about a Christian God anymore because they realize that turned people off. The number of people that started off with their higher power being a doorknob who ended up with their higher power as Jesus is unbelievable. And I think that's just fascinating. That yes, it is like
Yeah.
the higher power is it's like, yeah, yes. Sorry.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. It is this, and I think there is something so powerful about the way that AA understands the human condition, which is, I think, of one of the things that I'm really interested in this conversation about faith and work, this conversation about self-help, this conversation about, like, when we're talking with our wealth management clients, how do we talk to them about change if we actually understand the human condition the way that AA understands the human condition, which, as you've said, Taylor, is really the way the Bible understands human condition, because it says, like, well, actually, I think, again, the problem is bigger than me. I'm in need of a higher power. I'm in need of acknowledging that I can't solve this problem on my own.
Mm.
And this is where, like, so for so much of my life, I've thought that because of that, therefore, I'm going to I'm going to burn all the self-help books. But I think there is some throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you do that, because yes, um, with what I would say the big word would be, like, a Christian anthropology that is based on this exact same framework that you just described with AA, Taylor, is this understanding that, like, self-reliance is a false gospel. It's a false understanding of the world. Self-help is self-reliance in a nutshell. Therefore, throw the baby out with the bathwater. But the reality is like, gosh, how many of those people in an AA meeting on a Friday night or a Monday morning, like, those people know suffering really well. And
What brought them there?
those people also know, they know the limits of their willpower, but that doesn't stop them from desiring to improve. That doesn't stop them from desiring to love their neighbor. And whether that neighbor is their literal neighbor or their wife that they haven't spoken to in 3 months.
I have had this idea for an AA, a 12-step church, because alcohol is only mentioned one time in the 12 steps. In step one, you admit your life has become powerless over alcohol. You could replace that with anything. All the other steps are: I'm powerless. My life's unmanageable. I need a higher power. I'm going to do a fearless, searching, moral self-inventory of myself. I'm going to share it with somebody else for accountability. And the cleansing effect of that is incredible. I'm going to make amends with people I've wronged. I'm going to pass it on to others. Freaking beautiful.
It's called
Yeah, I
the
mean,
Episcopal. It's
talk
called
about
the
purpose.
Episcopal Church in Charlottesville, Virginia, Taylor.
There you go. A little full right there.
I mean, so in all
Yeah.
honesty, though, like, as
Yeah.
you said yourself, like, it's not a strange coincidence that AA sounds a lot like Christianity. It was
No, I mean,
like
that's
one of
Bill
the
Wilson wrote the book inspired by God. Like, that's the true story behind it.
Yeah,
Just
and an
they've had to
Episcopal minister helped him write it. Like, and it was started up in like,
Cleveland.
there's really, really interesting, like, when you say those things, you're describing confession, you're
Yeah.
describing repentance, you're describing, and the real beauty of it is this realization that, like, there are a lot of non-Christians who need help when it comes to
Yeah.
alcoholism, and if we can reach them, to your point, though, like, it's an incredible, um I think maybe before we were recording this, I was talking about, you were saying how, your love language is kind of pushing back on people, and I was
Good
like,
people. Yeah.
hey, I'm at the front of the line when it comes to making fun of my own church tradition.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I often say is, like, you you will hear a better sermon in an AA meeting than you will in like 80% of the churches in the United States on any given Sunday. Like that is beyond that is so true. But the most important part about that is this understanding of the human condition. It is this understanding of the human condition that we can't simply will ourselves to change as much as we would like to. The problem is bigger than we think it is. We are in need of acknowledging the fact that we can't, and all these things, we're going in circles a little bit here, but I think it's really interesting when it comes to this conversation about what is it that we're desiring, what is it that we're searching for, and also what is our purpose. Um, I love wrestling with these questions with some of the students that I work with. I also love talking about it with people who are in a midlife crisis. And I also love talking about it with people who are trying to figure out retirement. I mean, what is it that we are here for? And I find that if the purpose of our lives, if our why has much at all to do with the satisfaction that we get from performing well, or achieving something, that becomes extremely flawed. That is going to take us down a challenging place. And unfortunately, we live in such a conditional world in which that's kind of the only way that we see things. When you go on a UVA, on a college campus, when you go to a career fair, it's like, hey, come and work here. This is going to make you feel good. This is going to give you the most happiness. This is going to be the job that's going to get you the most likes on Instagram. I mean, on and on and on and on. But one of the real beauties of matching this AA anthropology with what is it that we're really searching for, which is love, and to feel like we're loved perfectly even when we recognize our imperfections, is this recognition that we need our purpose, we need our identity to be something that we receive rather than achieve. It's not based on my performance. It's given to me truly as a gift. And then that ends up being actually the beginning of this cycle where we get to where Colin was pointing out in this season of Christmas. Like, that gives us the hope of actually being the giver ourselves but you can't give something away if you haven't received it yet. And that's I think in many ways the gospel. And that's such a powerful central point of so many of these conversations, that always has to come down to this gift of the gospel that is not conditioned on our performance. In fact, it's something that is very important that we receive it, not achieve it. I don't know. I want to talk more about Morgan Housel, but I'm guessing we're running out of time.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, trying to think how we put a bow on this conversation, and there's no bow to put on it besides, like acknowledging that, as we've kind of said before, if you have that purpose, or at least are in a place where you have experienced suffering, or have gone through life events that have clarified what does and does not bring like lasting peace or joy. Not talking about the quick dopamine hits that money certainly can buy those on any downtown street corner, but like if you can have that purpose in mind as the starting point, the rest of like how you manage money and things like that just kind of is easy. What's really hard is the conversation we are having today. How do you get that purpose and meaning? There are answers in different faith traditions. There are answers perhaps through going through experiences. But that I feel like in some ways that's the whole point of life, is to kind of figure out what is it all for, and then the technical or the what to invest in, or how to manage, what insurance policies to buy, kind of falls into place if you've got the purpose right first.
Yeah. I think one of the things I really love about the answer to the question of like, what is my purpose? What is my why? And what in my opinion is the sort of Christian answer to that is loving my neighbor, is that it's not something that's subjective that changes. And when you have some sort of guiding truth that is an objective truth that isn't dependent upon you or the circumstances, um, that gives me some real hope when I'm trying to think about what some real like practical situations where I'm trying to figure out like what career should I go after? How should I handle this business deal? How should I structure this this board that I'm setting up? How should I think about my retirement? How should I like all of these different things? If my why is this like super subjective thing, then like well, the answer to that question is going to be dependent on what my mood is that day or how much suffering I'm enduring. But if it's simply like, well, is this something that is leading to you loving your neighbor or putting you in a better position to do so? That might not always the actual loving of your neighbor, sure, not an easy thing to do. However, that being the framework for you thinking about like answering all those different questions, I find that to be really helpful. I find it to be actually really practical. I find it to be really consistent. I find it to be something that's actually also really attractive to other people. Um, Morgan Housel talks, here we go with Morgan Housel. I mean, I think he talks a lot about like, you talk about like the eulogy virtues or like, it's not his own idea. It's the David Brooks idea of,
Yeah.
um, resume virtues versus eulogy virtues, I think, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a David Brooks thing.
this idea of um, like what is it that you want to teach your kids? What is it like? It's related to they're all tied up in this idea of love of neighbor, in my opinion, of this idea of like what matters the most to me is like spending time with my family. Because from biblically speaking, everyone in the world that's not you is your neighbor. And so like all of these things are connected with loving my neighbor. The idea of like, how do I want my kids to interact with people, including me and their friends and their teachers. It's all about trying, and not from the point of like, you need to be this like legalistic disciplinarian person who's saying like, you better be a good kid or nobody's going to like you. But it's like, this is kind of the point of life here. It's just trying to love. And it's never as easy as simply being told to do it and then just do it, like Colin said. But if we can kind of hold up this ideal, which we might call like the law of like, this is the point of our lives, is to love one another. And then you pulled up the other objective truth of the gospel that you've already been loved perfectly in your imperfections and forgiveness and mercy and unconditional grace that actually gives you hope for stepping into the fulfillment of that law, the fulfillment of the love in your life, um, a whole lot more effectively than just being told that's what you're supposed to do and trying to do it yourself through optimization and through the reading of some self-help book or another. Because like it's just life is just really hard. Um, and doing the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing is sure that's really, really hard. Um, but what's not hard is responding to love with something that looks a little bit more loving today than it did yesterday.
I like that.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, we could go on, and but we probably ought to sign off here and just Josh, thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank you for your openness and sharing your perspective. Yeah, definitely check out if any of this has resonated with the listeners. Check out Josh's writings on Cross Street on Substack, and yeah, I just invite listeners to go deeper than just the tactics or the techniques and the behavioral aspect and into these kind of bigger questions, because really if we start with the bigger questions and have a clear purpose, the rest becomes a whole lot easier in terms of planning. So yeah, Josh, thank you. And
The last thing I'll say is, like, Taylor, I don't remember if you were saying this in our pre-conversation or during the conversation, but like you've said, and maybe this is familiar with a lot of your listeners, you kept saying that money is a tool.
Mhm.
And like that's Morgan Housel's writing is something that actually kind of showed that as a new kind of concept to me, which was really, really helpful. And I find it to be really, as you're saying, Colin, like you kind of need to have both of these things. Like you have to, like, in order to, if we don't have the why, if we don't have the purpose, if we don't know what the meaning of all this is, well, then it's really harder to, it's kind of hard to see money as a tool at all because there's no end in mind. It's just like this kind of ladder that we're climbing, or I don't really know. I mean, it's the measuring stick rather than the tool. I don't know. I hope you pay your editor a lot of money because there's been a lot of rambling going on in this podcast on my end. But
AI, baby, AI. It's unbelievable. I'm going to click 3 buttons and this thing's going to be done. It's incredible. So, yeah. No, it's...
Well, guys, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoy the podcast experience with you today. I've enjoyed listening to it myself in the past. And I think, as I've said at the beginning, I think you're both doing some really amazing work. I think you're doing the work of loving your neighbor in a really wonderful way by helping them sleep through the night just a little bit better. That is truly a gift that both of you have. And I am grateful that there are people like you out there doing this kind of work.
Thank you.
Same to you. Your work's pretty important as well. Thanks for coming on, man. It's great.
All right, guys. Take care and hope you have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, same to you. Tiller, see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for listening. If you would like to learn more about Colin, Taylor, or the show in general, head to makethemostofyourmoneypodcast.com. All opinions expressed are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on the Make the Most of Your Money podcast should be considered advice. Always consult with your team of professionals before making any decisions regarding your finances.